like, comment, and subscribe for more content.
It's time to duel!
What's up, everybody? Welcome to this edition of a Funko Popcast. I'm DK Wrestler,
And I'm MD Shady.
and today is a very interesting podcast because we're trying something new. All week on our channel, if you haven't known yet, we had been dedicating this whole week on our channel to what will be, as this gets released, what would be tomorrow, the 20th anniversary of when the animation of Yu-Gi-Oh!, or in Japan, it's Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, released the first episode, which Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters aired their first episode April 18th, 2000, and which it ended September 29th, 2004. And that is the Japan air dates, because in North America, so throughout like US, Canada, Mexico, it was September 15th, 2001. That was the official first episode air date, and it ended June 10th, 2006. So if you're here to talk about the Yu-Gi-Oh! Funko Pops, and you're usually here for the Funko Pops, that's great. And if you're here because you're a Yu-Gi-Oh! Fan and you kind of stumbled upon it by searching up like Yu-Gi-Oh!, then that's also great. And if you're here for both, then that's even more amazing, because two worlds put into one. So yeah, we're going to talk about all 5 seasons of Yu-Gi-Oh! We'll talk about mainly of what we liked, what we didn't like. I'm going to talk about some of the characters, especially the ones that were made into Funko Pop form. And then at the end, we'll actually talk about maybe like a top 5 or top however many pops that we have listed down of what we want to see in the future made by Funko for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Lineup. I guess we'll kick off right to season 1, which season 1 has been divided into 3 different categories, or 3 different arcs, I should say, which the first part, which is the main storyline, is Duelist Kingdom, followed by Legendary Heroes, and then Dungeon Dice Monsters. So I guess we could kick off by talking about the main protagonist of the series, which is Yugi Moto, which he's a young boy who not only knows how to play the game of Duel Monsters, but he possesses the Millennium Puzzle, which is one of 7 Millennium items, which we will talk about more in description of what these Millennium items are as we get to season 5. Which the Millennium Puzzle, it actually contains a 5,000-year-old spirit that you guys would know as Yami Yugi, or the Pharaoh, which both those, Yugi Moto is in the next wave of Funko Pops, and Yami Yugi was already released in the first wave that was released in 2018. And then Seto Kaiba, which I guess the best way to describe him would be he's kind of a cold-hearted human who is not only the president and CEO of Kaiba Corporation, but in the beginning of season 1, he is the number 1 ranked duelist in the world. And in the first couple of episodes, he kidnaps Yugi's grandpa in order to steal a Blue Eyes White Dragon, because during that episode, grandpa shows Yugi that he has one of these cards and that there's only 4 of them made. And then it ends up that Kaiba rips up the card, and it's revealed that Kaiba has the other 3 Blue Eyes White Dragon cards. And now he's the only person in the world who has the Blue Eyes White Dragon, which I kind of find it's weird that he would just randomly do that, because of the fact that, like, what if he did lose one? Then he's not able to use it to make Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, so basically the first duel that happens in season 1 is Yugi versus Seto Kaiba. And then this is where you kind of introduce the Pharaoh, because Yugi's Millennium Puzzle, whenever he wants to summon the Pharaoh, it kind of does this spin, and then he yells out Yu-Gi-Oh! And then transforms into him. And then in season 1, he doesn't even really know that he kind of is transforming into the Pharaoh until later on. Yeah, so the first duel, like I said, is Seto Kaiba and Yugi, in which Yugi actually ends up winning after doing what at this time had never happened before, and that is being able to have all 5 pieces of the card known as Exodia the Forbidden One, which will be an upcoming Funko Pop in the next lineup of Yu-Gi-Oh! And he ends up not only wiping out Kaiba's Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon that he does end up summoning in the battle, but he drains the rest of his life points. And Kaiba is defeated for basically the first time in his life. And then we'll kind of mention that after this, he kind of goes into this kind of depression, and he kind of, don't mean to kind of pun to the world situation, but he kind of self-isolates himself from the world. And then I guess this where it brings into the season's main antagonist, which is Maximilian Pegasus, also a Funko Pop that is coming out in the next wave. This is the creator of Duel Monsters, and he possesses the Millennium Eye, which once again is another Millennium item. After he had found out about Kaiba losing against Yugi, he sends Yugi an invite to compete in his Duelist Kingdom tournament that will happen at this name of the same place of Duelist Kingdom. And he sends him a videotape also, like a VHS tape. And it essentially sends him into a shadow game. And then at the same time, his grandpa's soul ends up getting taken, which then that basically leads to the whole Duelist Kingdom arc. And how the storyline is basically Yugi essentially has to compete in this Duelist Kingdom tournament in order to save his grandpa's soul. In the tournament, the winner of the tournament also gets a cash prize and the chance to face Pegasus in a duel, which, and I guess also will introduce the character of Joey Wheeler, which once again, this will be an upcoming Funko Pop in the upcoming Yu-Gi-Oh wave, which he's essentially Yugi's best friend, but they did talk about how he used to be a bully to Yugi, and there's actually a scene in season 1 where he actually like either like throws the entire Millennium Puzzle or like a piece of it in like some sort of body of water. I can't remember whether it was like a lake or even in a pool or something. But then it ends up like Joey and I think Tristan were getting like bullied by some group of thugs, and Yugi just stands up, and that's when Joey like realizes, oh wow, this kid's cool, and then they became friends. In season 1, he's kind of brand new to the whole Duel Monsters game. And he ends up developing his skills while competing in the Duelist Kingdom tournament, and he actually develops them a lot, surprisingly. Biggest reason why Joey has decided, even though that he kind of is very inexperienced at Duel Monsters, he wants to win it for the cash prize because he finds out that his sister Serenity has this kind of situation with her eyes where she is basically close to being blind. So he wants to win the cash prize so that he can pay for the surgery that Serenity needs in order to not become blind. Obviously, throughout the tournament, you meet characters such as My Valentine, Weevil Underwood, Rex Raptor. One of the antagonists you end up meeting is Panic, and there's Bandit Keith and Bakura, which you do get to see a lot during this series.
One of my biggest gripes is actually the first battle. I don't think it was necessary for Yugi to pull all 5 pieces of Exodia on his first battle, on the show at least. It just doesn't really make sense. You would think that it would be more of a build-up to that actually happening. But I guess it does pave the way for a good storyway and a good thing that Yugi has over Kaiba at the beginning. I kind of wanted to talk about Pegasus a little bit, about how he's so weird of a character, because I noticed that he likes to call anybody, he'll say their name and then he'll say boy afterwards.
Yeah. He says that a lot.
Yeah, Yugi boy, Kaiba boy, freaking Joey boy, anybody he's dueling, he'll call them boy, which I find very funny because in season 1, Pegasus is only 24 years old.
I actually didn't even know that he was that young, actually. I don't even remember if they said that in the show, or it's just
No,
some weird
I don't think
thing.
they actually say it, but I think it says it on Wikipedia. But yeah, he's only 24 years old apparently, and I get it, Yugi and Joey and Tristan, and what's the girl's name?
Taya.
Taya, yes. They're all younger, they're in their, I would say they're probably 15, 16 years old, right?
Yeah, because I think they're all in high school, so they're around a teenage age, all
Yeah.
the group.
But then Kaiba, he owns his own company. He's obviously probably at least 20.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I think even earlier today, I think Kaiba, just by the way that he looks, he's got to be 25 the most.
Yeah, and I just find it funny that Pegasus is so hung up over himself that he likes to try and degrade these people by calling them boys. I thought that was so funny throughout the whole series.
I'll go on now to some of the duels that have happened. You're more than welcome to kind of jump in and talk about them. So the first one I really want to talk about is Joey Wheeler and Rex Raptor, which this happens after. So Joey battles Mai, and Joey kind of wins by a fluke, let's say, because once again, Joey's very inexperienced. This brings up the introduction of Red Eye's Black Dragon, because in this duel, which I mentioned, Red Eye's Black Dragon, once again, it's a Funko Pop that is coming out in the release within the next couple of months of this upcoming wave. So in this duel, it's basically Joey is fighting Rex, and Rex is kind of fighting for Mai. And there's some rules placed, like Joey can't get advice from Yugi or anyone else, or he's disqualified. And what happens is they wager their best duel monster, or kind of their rarest duel monster, and the winner would get the loser's rarest monster, which Rex Raptor at this point owns Red Eye's Black Dragon. And I'm pretty sure, if I'm not mistaken, I forget, and I should have added it to my list of stuff here. Well, I know Joey wins the duel and keeps Red Eye's Black Dragon because he uses it throughout the series. But I'm pretty sure he wins the duel by using Time Wizard.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's correct.
Because I remember, like, I think he does that. He always likes to do that combo of using Baby Dragon and Time Wizard. And I think that's how he ended up winning that duel. Another one, the one thing I do like about season 1 is some of the crazy duels in which there ends up being crazier duels within season 2, which I'll get to. This one I'm going to talk about is Yami Yugi against Yami Bakura, and it's a shadow game. So everyone is chilling at this like campfire, and Bakura, just being himself, is like, what's your favorite card in your deck? And all of a sudden everyone goes and like takes out their favorite cards in their decks, and all of a sudden like they send everyone to the shadow realm and doing a shadow game. But Yami Yugi's the one that's facing Yami Bakura because everyone is their favorite card in the decks. So you end up seeing Yugi as Dark Magician. And I think Joey, I don't think Joey is Red Eye's Black Dragon. I think Joey is, wow, I can't think of it. Obviously, if anyone's listening to this, comment in the comment section below of what the dual monster Joey is during this. But of course, Yami Yugi ends up winning and everyone is back to normal, even regular Bakura. And then we move on later on. There is a second battle between Kaiba and Yugi, in which this kind of gets intense. It ends up, near the end, is that Yugi ends up surrendering the duel because by using one of his duel monsters, if he attacks Kaiba's duel monster, kind of the force of that will actually push Kaiba off of the edge of the building and basically kill himself. So for not doing that, he ends up surrendering. And so Kaiba, after that, will be the first one that gets to enter the castle in order to face Pegasus. Kaiba goes, he battles Maximilian Pegasus, and one of the things he needs to do is save his brother Mokuba, because during the season, Mokuba actually gets kidnapped and gets placed in kind of this cell. But during this battle, Kaiba does end up losing to Pegasus because of the perks involved with Pegasus Millennium Eye. What happens is that Mokuba, Grandpa, and Kaiba, their souls get placed into blank duel cards. So they end up becoming like their own cards, essentially. And then we'll go straight to the semifinals, where the final 4 are Mai Valentine, Yugi Moto, Bandit Keith, and Joey Wheeler. We have Mai versus Yugi, and then Bandit Keith versus Joey Wheeler. In the semifinals, Yugi defeats Mai, and then Joey defeats Bandit Keith, which makes the finals between Yugi and Joey, with Yugi ending up winning. And Joey's kind of disappointed because he's like, oh no, I didn't win, so I don't get the cash prize. But because Yugi gets both the cash prize and a chance to face Pegasus, the real reason of Yugi going to this tournament is to save his grandpa's soul. Out of the kindness of his heart, he ends up actually giving the entire cash prize, which, if I'm not mistaken, they've stated it's $3 million. And he ends up giving the entire $3 million to Joey to help out Serenity in her surgery, which, damn, that's some nice act of kindness right there. And then, obviously, it's Yugi and Pegasus in the final duel of the season. Well, I wouldn't say of the season, and I'll say why, but of this arc at least. Yugi defeats Pegasus after Pegasus just used so many weird tactics, even cards that are brand new as of that game. And then I think, if I'm not mistaken, Yugi uses Magician of Black Chaos to defeat Pegasus and wipe out his life points. And it ends up Pegasus goes missing after this. And even the Millennium Eye is missing. And you get to learn kind of how Pegasus ended up getting the Millennium Eye from a new character called Shoddy, who holds the Millennium Key, which once again is another Millennium item. The Legendary Heroes arc starts where Yugi is back from the Duelist Kingdom. He ends up facing a regional champion, which is actually the youngest regional champion by the name of Rebecca Hawkins, which this kind of lasts, I think, 3 episodes of this duel. And Yugi ends up being Rebecca Hawkins, and Rebecca is the granddaughter of a friend of Grandpa, which is Arthur Hawkins. And then it's found out that Arthur actually gave Grandpa the 4th Blue Eyes White Dragon. And through this arc, there's also this weird kind of storyline with Kaiba getting trapped in a virtual reality world. And they kind of try and get Kaiba out of there. Can't exactly remember what happens, just because at this point in season 1, I just feel, why couldn't they just end it with possibly like the Yugi Pegasus battle, or even the way that it's ended for like with Shoddy in that. The third arc, which basically ends the season, is the Dungeon Dice Monsters arc, which we introduce the character of Duke Devlin, which is an owner of a new game that has moved across the street from Yugi's grandpa's store, in which Duke Devlin and Joey end up dueling, and Joey loses, which in that wager, Joey is forced to dress up as a dog and kind of be the servant of Duke Devlin. But then Yugi ends up battling, but not in a Duel Monsters duel, but in a Dungeon Dice Monsters duel. They end up facing, and obviously Yugi wins, and Joey is free. It ends up Duke Devlin after this whole thing, they end up being friends, and you see that Duke Devlin is with them through the rest of the adventures for the rest of like the series.
I actually really enjoyed the dice game. At first, I kind of thought it was like weird because like, okay, why are we doing this? Like, this is supposed to be about Yu-Gi-Oh, a card game, obviously. But that being said, I thought it was a really cool like idea for a game, and like I would totally play that in real life. But I also do love dice games, so it's kind of like an unbiased opinion or whatever, or a biased opinion. I thought that was really cool. I really liked the episode where they kind of showed why Pegasus is kind of such an asshole that he is.
Yeah, because of the whole thing with like his wife,
Fiance
pretty
or
sure.
whatever, yeah.
Yeah, something like that, and ends up going missing.
Yes. It's good to show a backstory for a villain where you kind of feel like sympathy for him because of what's happened to him, and you understand like, okay, this is why this guy's such a That's literally all you can say.
All right, so now we're going to move on to season 2, which the one thing I really love about season 2 is that they make one storyline and they stick to one storyline. But yes, season 2, the whole thing is about a new tournament called the Battle City Tournament, in which this tournament was created by Seto Kaiba to kind of prove that he is still the best duelist in the world. He wants to kind of redeem himself from his little duel against Yugi. During this, he wants to obtain many powerful cards because throughout this tournament, the rules are set that the tournament is a single elimination tournament in which the winner of each duel obtains the rarest card in the deck of the person they have defeated, and it obviously goes until there is one person left. The main antagonist of season 2, in which I truly believe, in my opinion, is the best antagonist in the whole Yu-Gi-Oh series, and that's Merrick Ishtar. He is trying to take over the world in season 2 by obtaining all 3 Egyptian god cards, and he also has a group of servants that are known as rare hunters, in which that's kind of how season 2 kind of kicks off, in which Yugi, Taya, Tristan, and Joey, they're on their way to school for like some event, I'm pretty sure. And there's this kind of fortune teller there. They ask to kind of give a personal item of theirs, which Yugi gets fooled by giving the Millennium Puzzle, which ends up getting stolen. And they lead to this weird building where there's a rare hunter going to duel Yugi, which that rare hunter ends up being Bandit Keith, which you would have seen in season 1. But Bandit Keith is not himself. He's actually possessed by Merrick Ishtar, which Merrick holds a Millennium item, which kind of causes that, which I will explain once again once we reach season 5. And that was a pretty crazy duel, actually. And then another character that gets introduced is Ishizu Ishtar, which is actually ends up being the sister of Merrick, in which she holds a Millennium item called the Millennium Necklace. And she's kind of like showing Kaiba around this museum where there is kind of this big piece that shows that Kaiba actually has a history with ancient Egypt and that he has some ancestors. And Kaiba, being as arrogant as he is, just doesn't believe it. And because of the way that the Millennium Necklace works, Ishizu thinks that Kaiba can help prevent Merrick from taking over the world with the Egyptian god cards. So Ishizu actually gives Kaiba one of the Egyptian god cards, which ends up being Obelisk the Tormentor, which, as many Funko Pop fans know, Obelisk the Tormentor will be in a 6-inch Funko Pop form and will be exclusive to EB Games / GameStop and should expect to be released within the next couple of months with the new wave.
I'm pretty okay with season 2. I like it, but obviously season 1 just has like a lot more of a nostalgic kind of feel to it, I guess you could say. I do like how they introduced the Egyptian god cards, so I thought that was very smart, and obviously everyone loves the Egyptian gods, so super cool to see that.
There are so many crazy duels that just makes, in my opinion, season 2 better than season 1. So the first one, it's not so crazy, but Yami Yugi ends up facing a rare hunter in a battle because Joey kind of got stopped by a bunch of rare hunters and forced them into a duel where this guy ended up having like 3 of each piece of Exodia. And that's basically how this guy won, by summoning Exodia, which you don't really see like Exodia being formed. It was just kind of what the facial reaction of Joey was, which that's one thing I like to point out with the whole animation is how Joey is so great at his facial expressions and kind of his reactions. It just makes it all like super funny, in my opinion, at least. And yeah, during this battle, there's a card that Yugi ends up using against the Rare Hunter where I think he destroys all of like one piece of Exodia so that the guy can't summon Exodia. Yeah, and he ends up winning the battle. He gets Joey's Red Eyes Black Dragon, but I'm pretty sure after that, Joey says, "Keep the card safe for me." So Yugi ends up having Red Eyes Black Dragon for a little while. And especially it's a huge component of what's happening later on, which now I'm going to go into the introduction of another Egyptian god card that gets summoned during a duel between a more kind of side antagonist named Strings as the duel's Yami Yugi, in which that Egyptian god card is Slifer the Sky Dragon. This will be in the upcoming Yu-Gi-Oh! Funko Pop line as it's a 6-inch pop and it'll be exclusive to Hot Topic. And yeah, and obviously Yugi ends up winning that duel. I forget how, but he does. And that means at this moment, 3 people have 3 separate Egyptian god cards, which obviously you guys would know. Kaiba has Obelisk the Tormentor. Yugi now has Slifer the Sky Dragon. And the main antagonist, Merrick, has the third, in which it's not in a Funko Pop form, unfortunately, at least not yet, is the Winged Dragon of Ra. Then this duel that actually is one of my favorites because it involves kind of a variant of a duel monster that I kind of wanted to see how it happened. And it's a battle between a person named Arcana and Yami Yugi, in which their duel is kind of crazy because their ankles are locked up against some sort of contraption. And essentially there's these kind of like weird razor blade or kind of like a saw blade going from each side. And every time you lose life points, the saw blade goes closer to you. And once you get hit to it, you get sent to the Shadow Realm. And the one thing I love about this episode is that there is an evil dark magician that gets summoned by Arcana, which is kind of like red and silver in that. It's different from the normal dark magician, but I always loved the way that dark magician looked. And then obviously Yugi ends up winning this, but he kind of attempts to save Arcana though, because, you know, Yugi is this protagonist, and even though he might have beef with people, he just doesn't want people to get like sent to the Shadow Realm or just die, I guess. During the season, Yami Bakura and Yami Merrick actually form an alliance to kind of get all the Egyptian god cards and take out everyone that stands in front of them. And then here comes the craziest duel in this season, and probably one of, definitely in like the top 5 most craziest duels when it comes to the entire series. It's a duel between Yugi and Joey, but at this point, Joey ends up being possessed by Merrick. This is kind of a crazy situation in which they get sent to this kind of area where it's like a dock, and their ankles are locked up. This duel has a 1 hour time limit in which if they don't finish the duel in 1 hour, what happens is that this big anchor drops in a body of water. And if they can't unlock their ankles, because also whoever wins the duel, a box unlocks for them, which contains the key to unlock the ankle shackles, in which if they don't unlock those on time, the anchor drops in the body of water and both of them drown with the anchor. And the whole thing kind of drops into the water with some of the craziest moments in Yu-Gi-Oh! I think this duel actually lasts, I'm pretty sure, like a good 4 episodes. Yugi ends up surrendering the duel so that Joey is able to save himself. But then Joey, he goes all Tarzan mode, jumps on the anchor and kind of like Tarzans across the kind of dock. And he goes to unlock the key for Yugi, but the whole thing collapses and they're both in the body of water. Joey ends up unlocking the key for Yugi and he saves Yugi, but then Joey is kind of stuck down there. All of a sudden, Serenity, because she's actually out of the hospital at this time, jumps in the water and saves Joey. And I was like, whoa, such a crazy thing. Like, I can only imagine what anyone's reaction would be if you were in a situation like that where you're on a 1 hour time limit, your ankles are tied up, and if you don't unlock them, then you drown and you die. The season 2 ending ends up being a shadow game, which is between Yami Bakura and Yami Merrick. The winner of this duel obtains both the Millennium Ring and the Millennium Rod, and the loser gets banished to the Shadow Realm forever. The duel ends with Yami Merrick defeating Bakura using the Winged Dragon of Ra, and I'm pretty sure both competitors only had 1 life point left. But yeah, overall, season 2 was just great. And now season 3, which I know MD won't talk about much because he basically either finished season 2 or almost finished season 2. But I know you haven't seen season 3, 4, or 5, correct? Or at least rewatched.
I haven't seen 3 or 4. I remember watching episodes of 5, like when it was on TV. So there was a lot of things from season 5 where I was like, oh, okay, I do remember that. So I would assume a lot of that would happen with 3 and 4 when you discuss it, because Yu-Gi-Oh has been a big part of my life for a long time, so I do know a lot about it. But
yeah, so season 3 is divided into 2 different arcs. So the first half, it brings to the arc called Noah's Saga. So the first half of season 3 kicks off. They're on a blimp on their way to a certain destination where the Battle City tournament semi and finals will take place. But before they can make it to the destination, their blimp gets hijacked and they end up in some sort of weird ship underwater. All of a sudden, they get directed to go to some little place. And almost everyone, except I think like Ashizu and like Merrick and all that, don't get sent into this virtual world where they have to defeat these characters called the Big Five in order to escape. So the main antagonist of this arc is Noah. I'm not saying his last name because I will mention it later on when one of his battles happen. So his servants, like I said, are the Big Five, which are named Crump, Gansley, Nesbit, Lecter, I'm pretty sure that's how it's pronounced, and Johnson, which the Big Five, you might not remember them basically off the top of your head, but once I mentioned that Big Five were in season 1 because they were the workers for Kaiba at Kaiba Corp during the season. And during season 1, when Kaiba kind of comes back and saves everything, that he ends up firing the Big Five because instead of kind of staying true to the alliance with Seto Kaiba, they joined sides with Pegasus while Pegasus was trying to take over and become the president and CEO of Kaiba Corp. And so that leads, I won't really talk about this arc much because I wasn't really the biggest fan of this arc. And kind of in my opinion, I feel Noah is probably like the worst antagonist throughout
so what
this
you're
series.
trying to say is you don't like Noah's Ark?
Ha, funny. Ha, puns. That's very punny. Yeah, so Noah and Kaiba, that's obviously got to be a duel. And it is revealed, and that's why I wanted to save, is that Noah is Noah Kaiba. Because Noah is actually Seto and Mokuba's adopted brother, because their father, Gozuboru, Noah is the biological son of Gozuboru, while Seto and Mokuba were adopted from somewhere. And they kind of became like adopted, I would say, half brothers. I guess that would be the perfect way to say it, instead of like actual brothers.
Yeah.
And during this kind of arc, there's some crazy moments, like the one I'm going to mention now is how Noah ends up brainwashing Mokuba to turn his back on Seto. And then Seto's kind of worried. Noah ends up defeating Seto and turns him and Mokuba into stone, which he likes to do a lot. He ended up turning Joey into stone, Serenity into stone. Yeah, and then Yugi ends up facing Noah. Yugi ends up beating Noah by using 3 blue eyes white dragons that were clearly given to him by Seto Kaiba before he got turned into stone. And then you got to see kind of a crazy moment, but not really, between Seto and a virtual form of Gozuboru. Seto ends up defeating Gozuboru, though, by using the Blue Eyes White Dragon and taking out what Gozuboru had summoned, which is Exodia Necros, which isn't entirely Exodia, but it's kind of like this knockoff, like black version. Like, let's say Exodia is Gucci and this Necros version is Walmart in this case. That's all it is. And then after that, the virtual world ends up exploding and they all escape to begin the second half of the arc, which is Enter the Shadow Realm, which is essentially the ending of the Battle City tournament. So I kind of like this way that they ended up deciding the semifinals of the tournament. So instead of a normal bracket, they have taken all 4 competitors, which in this, it's Seto Kaiba, Yugi Moto, Joey Wheeler, and Merrick Ishtar. And they kicked off with what was called a 4-way free-for-all duel, where the first 2 duelists who lose their life points will be put together in the semifinals, while the people with the life points remaining get put together also. But the people who had lost their life points would end up kicking off the semifinals of the tournament. So that ends up being Yami Merrick and Joey Wheeler, who face each other first. And then you have Seto Kaiba and Yugi Moto. Merrick ends up winning because Joey is almost ready to win the duel, but at the same time, Yami Merrick sends the both of them to a shadow game. So their duel ends up being a shadow game, and it takes out a lot of energy in a normal person when they do this. So when Joey's about to summon his duel monster to basically end the game, because if he would have won the game, he actually ends up passing out and the attack doesn't go through. So then Merrick, which I'm pretty sure used Winged Dragon of Ra, if I'm not mistaken, defeated Joey and moves on to the finals. Yami Yugi defeats Kaiba and ends up obtaining Obelisk the Tormentor. So now Yugi has both Slifer the Sky Dragon and Obelisk the Tormentor in his deck, while Yami Merrick still has Winged Dragon of Ra. When the finals ends up happening, it's Merrick and Yugi, which that lasts, I think, 3 episodes, which Yugi ends up defeating Merrick because of the fact that he kind of used the tactic from season 2 to kind of let Joey escape from the possessed self. He actually is able to talk to the good side of Merrick, which throughout the season, you actually get to see the good side of Merrick take over bodies to kind of tell people like, hey, this is what you're supposed to do, which mainly he did that with Taya. He took over her body and kind of told Ishizu everything. Yugi was able to kind of get the good side to be embraced for Merrick, and the good side escapes the evil Merrick and surrenders the duel. Yeah, so that's what ends it. And the season ends with Yugi obtaining all 3 Egyptian god cards.
Yeah, I definitely need to watch that season because it does seem cool. And yeah, obviously it's a pretty well known fact that Yugi was going to have all 3 of the Egyptian god cards. It's definitely a good lead up to it for sure.
All right, so we got season 4, which I know in Japan there was no like title for it, but in our version, the North American version, the season was called Waking the Dragons, in which I felt, in my opinion, while watching it, I felt season 4 was the worst season out of the 5. I just feel like the way that some of the like storyline was going was just very weird, and I'll explain that in a little bit. I do feel season 3 was better. So season 4 kicks off with a new group of antagonists on bikes, stealing all 3 Egyptian god cards from Yugi to give to their master in order to take over the world, in which Yugi at this point, he's going back to the museum where Kaiba ended up getting his Obelisk the Tormentor to kind of preserve them in like the museum. But on the way there, it obviously gets stolen. The main antagonist of season 4 goes by the name of Darts, which his main mission is to take souls using a card known as the Seal of Orichalcos in order to collect enough energy to summon the Great Leviathan to destroy the world. He has servants throughout the series by the names of Alistair, Valen, and Raphael. Season 4, there's also the return in hologram form of Maximilian Pegasus, which you don't see him since season 1. So it was kind of cool to see Maximilian Pegasus again, and he's telling Yugi exactly what Darts is planning to do and how he's using duel monsters to basically wipe out the entire world. And my Valentine returns to season 4 because in season 2, which I didn't mention, but I was saving it for this particular point, that one of the quarterfinal matches was Merrick versus Mai, in which because Merrick won, Mai ended up getting sent to the Shadow Realm by Merrick. And then she actually ends up joining this whole like cult with Alistair, Valen, and Raphael. There's quite a bit of battles, but not really ones that like stand out to me. Like not really ones, like if I were to mention like a top 5 favorite duels, I don't think really any of them would make it besides maybe one, which is the one I'm going to mention right now, which is Yami Yugi versus Raphael. So Darts believes that by obtaining the soul of Yami Yugi, he's able to summon Leviathan without even having to get any more souls. And it ends up actually Raphael defeats Yami Yugi, which is very rare for Yugi to actually lose a duel. The whole purpose was for Yami's soul to be taken, but what ends up happening is that because Pharaoh and Yugi like keep switching places a lot, Yugi's soul actually pushes Yami out of the kind of Seal of Orichalcos and ends up taking Yugi's soul instead of the Pharaoh's soul, because basically Yugi would know that the Pharaoh would be able to defeat Darts. Yami is so upset of this. And then we also see the return of Weevil and Rex Raptor that actually decide to join Darts because they want revenge on Yugi and Joey for, past duels. And there's actually a couple of battles that take place after a train hijack in which I think both of them lose, as in Weevil and Rex Raptor. So their souls are taken. And then basically kind of the last duel that takes place in the season is basically a 2-on-1 duel between Darts against Seto Kaiba and Yami Yugi, which throughout this season, Yami is telling Seto, like, dude, we need to work together or else we're not going to defeat Darts and the world's going to get taken over. And as arrogant as Seto is, he keeps, complaining like, oh, I don't believe all this ancient Egypt crap and that I'm not going to work with you. And they end up working together. During the duel, though, Seto's soul gets taken because his life points get taken out. But Yugi ends up defeating Darts, of course, by using a duel monster that was used to defeat Leviathan back in the day. There's kind of like, it's almost like one of the Egyptian god cards, but in like a different time, which is Timaeus. Now, as I think about it, it's Timaeus, the Knight of Destiny, which was actually, I think it was another duel monster formed with Timaeus. And then they ended up taking out Darts. But Darts ends up giving up his soul to awaken Leviathan. And then there's a small battle between Joey, because obviously Joey's back because he ended up getting his soul taken by Mai. Joey, Seto, and Yugi defeat Leviathan in a battle after Yugi summoned all 3 Egyptian god cards to defeat Leviathan. And then once that happened, all of the captured souls were free. So, all the characters are back. Weevil, Raphael, Rex Raptor, all of those guys.
It actually doesn't sound like too bad of a season, in my opinion. I do like the fact that they kind of had Kaiba still being like his arrogant ways, not wanting to go with Yugi, even though it's something that they needed to do. And then eventually it does happen. I think that makes perfect sense.
Now we're moving on to season 5, which I truly believe this is the best season of the whole Yu-Gi-Oh series. It's divided into 3 parts if you're watching the Japanese version, or 4 parts if you are watching it, obviously, in the English dubbed version that was released in US and Canada, which you have the KC Grand Championship, Capsule Monsters, Dawn of the Duel, and the Final Duel. So the first part of Season 5 kicks off with a brand new Duel Monsters tournament created by Seto Kaiba called the KC Grand Championship, or Kaiba Corp Grand Championship Tournament. Kaiba created the tournament to make up for what had happened during the Battle City tournament in Season 2 and 3 and kind of the events that happened there. The tournament will have 16 of the best duelists from across the world to compete in a single elimination tournament where the winner will duel Yugi Moto, and the winner of that duel against Yugi will be getting the title of the King of Duels. And Seto Kaiba actually decides not to join the tournament because at this time he is developing Kaiba Land, which is like an amusement park, and he's already built one, which is where the KC Grand Championship is happening, but he's building more across the world. So that's why he's not in it, which I liked how Kaiba Land ended up turning out. One of the main arenas is called the Kaiba Dome, which is in the shape of a head of Blue Eyes White Dragon. I feel like a lot of things, though, are Blue Eyes White Dragon related. Like they have a roller coaster there that is the body of a Blue Eyes White Dragon, which could you imagine making a Kaiba Land in real life? Like I think Disney made Pizza Planet an actual thing, and then they ended up closing it. Imagine Konami making an actual Kaiba Land amusement park.
Yeah, that'd be nuts. I would love that.
I feel like, though, for some reason, if someone were to travel to this, it would end up being in Japan just because that's where it was originated. But if it was somewhere like Florida or something, I think that'd be a little better. But
Yeah, it would 100% be in Japan. No doubt about it.
I'll introduce the antagonist for this arc, which is Siegfried Lloyd. Later on, his name is actually Siegfried von Schroeder. There's been heated history between Kaiba and Siegfried because their families are kind of rivals. They're two different companies. And one of the things that really just kind of set the bar there is the fact that the von Schroeders were the ones, I guess, who allegedly created the whole virtual like dual discs and everything, the things that you would know that Kaiba ended up creating, like, you know, those fancy dual discs, the kind of virtual platforms to duel. And I guess supposedly, according to him, that they ended up stealing the idea, and originally Maximilian Pegasus was going to agree to a deal with the von Schroeders, but ended up agreeing to a deal with Kaiba Corp instead. So that kind of just ticked Siegfried off. And then Siegfried, throughout the series, he actually has this weird skill of like hacking into systems. And so obviously I won't go through every single battle of the tournament because there are technically 8 in the first round because there's 16 people. So then it ends up being like close to 20 battles overall that you get to see throughout this season. So the first one that I wanted to mention is the very first battle that happens, which the battle is between Joey Wheeler and a character called Apnarg Otem. Yugi, Taya, and everyone is thinking like, gosh, we know this person. Like, he looks so recognizable. It was a short guy with overalls, and he's wearing this mask. And like, Yugi already knows who it is. And then finally, Joey's the only one who doesn't know who it is. But it ends up, if you take Abnarg Autumn and flip it backwards, it spells Grandpa Moto. So it ends up being Grandpa Moto in this tournament, who actually he begged Mokuba and Seto to join the tournament because he really wanted to see if he can still duel. So yeah, it's Joey and Grandpa Moto in this tournament to kind of see if Joey's skills have developed. And it ends up that Joey does beat Grandpa Moto. And then Joey's reaction after finding out that he's Grandpa Moto is just priceless because, once again, like I've mentioned, Joey has like some of the best reactions and facial expressions in that whole animation.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's
I
like,
believe Grandpa's name is Solomon.
yeah, his real name is Solomon Moto. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the finals end up being Leon Wilson, which is one of these regional champions who's actually, I think, the youngest regional champion now, with the predecessor of that record being from Rebecca Hawkins, as said about during season 1. It's Leon Wilson versus Siegfried Lloyd, which obviously they later find out that it's actually Siegfried von Schroeder, which Leon wins by disqualification because of the fact that Kaiba finds out that Siegfried actually entered the tournament in a false name, which is in breach of contract of the tournament. So automatically Leon wins. Siegfried finds it unfair, but it is kind of fair. But Seto, because he has history with Siegfried, ends up saying, you know what? Let's face in a duel right now. And if you win the duel, the match with Leon would basically restart and it would count as a finals match. But if Seto wins, then Leon still moves on in the match against Yugi, in which Seto ends up beating Siegfried by using all 3 of his Blue Eyes White Dragon and wiping out his life points. And then the finals we have here is Leon Wilson against Yami Yugi, in which during this duel, actually a card called the Golden Castle of Stromberg gets played, and it ends up actually being an illegal card, which shocks Seto because originally he had programmed the system to not play that card, but it ends up being revealed that Leon Wilson, his real name is actually Leon von Schroeder, and he's the brother of Siegfried. Leon was forced into the tournament to kind of be a backup plan of having the Von Schroeders ending up winning the tournament. Leon, shown at first, he is a huge fan of Yugi and the way that he duels in that. And he feels that because that Siegfried rigged the system in order to help him win this duel because of this illegal card, that he wants to surrender. But Yugi insists on Leon not surrendering and finishing the duel, whether Leon actually wins or Yugi ends up winning, which Yugi does end up winning. And I forget how he exactly destroys the Golden Castle of Stromberg, which essentially, as they describe it, is an indestructible card. And then, so Yugi is the king of duels. And then we move on. I'm not going to mention too much about this because I felt like this was a little bit unnecessary, but in our version in North America, there was a 12-episode miniseries, which is another arc, but it didn't exist in the Japanese version, called Capsule Monsters, which I kind of like the idea of Capsule Monsters more than, let's say, when they did the virtual stuff. So how it would kick off, though, Joey spins this wheel in order to win vacation tickets to, I think it's India or something. And Joey ends up winning them. And so Joey, Taya, Tristan, and Yugi, they're all on their way to India, but the plane that they're in crashes. I think they end up crashing into Egypt because there's a bunch of pyramids. And they go into one of the pyramids and they find out from another person that Grandpa is missing because Grandpa is on one of his little adventures. When they walk into this pyramid, the floor looks like this map. And then once they go down a couple steps and once they step on the floor, whatever part of the map they step on, they actually get sent to that part of the map. So Joey falls in first and everyone follows. The main story is that they're trying to find Grandpa, but then along the way, they're collecting these capsule monsters and they got to fill up this meter of some sorts, as far as I can explain it the best. And it's all right, but I feel like, let's say after like rewatching it over, if I were to rewatch this series again, I would skip Capsule Monsters and go straight to the next arc, which is the Dawn of the Duel, which I really like this arc because it's answering a lot of questions that fans have been wanting. And that is exactly what happened back in Egypt. So basically, it's the storyline of Yami Yugi going back in time 5,000 years ago to relive his days as king, but as he goes back, he doesn't remember anything because it's been mentioned, I think, in the first couple of seasons that when Yami Yugi conquered the dark monster 5,000 years ago and saved Egypt, he wiped out his memory. So he doesn't remember anything that happens back in Egypt. And essentially, he doesn't remember his name either, which isn't Pharaoh or it's Yami. The main antagonist of this season is Yami Bakura, which when I first watched it, I was like, that doesn't make sense. Like, Yami Bakura got sent to the Shadow Realm in season 2. Although he was sent to the Shadow Realm, he's able to come back because a part of his soul actually lived inside of Yugi's Millennium Puzzle after it was smashed into pieces at the beginning of season 2, because that does happen during the battle with the possessed bandit Keith. But yeah, the main mission for Bakura is to collect all 7 Millennium items and bring back the dark monster known as Zork, which kind of ruled Egypt back 5,000 years ago. But the only way to defeat Zork, and it was described, is that the Pharaoh must call out his name, which, like I described, the Pharaoh doesn't remember his name, which that now will bring to the part of this podcast where I get to talk about each Millennium item and what the Millennium item does. So starting off, the Millennium Puzzle, which is obviously held by Yugi throughout the series, it summons and controls dual monsters, including Egyptian god cards. Millennium Eye, which you would have seen Pegasus use, and there's a character in this season called Akhenaten that uses it in ancient Egypt, which basically steals minds and steals souls. That's the purpose of that. The Millennium Ring, which you see Bakura use throughout the series mainly, but you end up seeing a character called Mahad use it at the beginning of season 5, basically finds whatever the owner seeks and it acts like a compass. The Millennium Scale, which I don't think you see until this season, which finds out how much darkness is in a person's heart. So it kind of balances. And if it goes to like a certain side, then it shows how much darkness is in someone's heart. The Millennium Key, which you would have seen Shoddy use at the end of season 1, enters a person's mind and sees what they're thinking and everything. The Millennium Rod, which you'd have seen Merrick use in season 2, but is used by what is called Priest Seto, which is the ancestor essentially of Seto Kaiba, which the Millennium Rod controls minds, which explains about the whole possession thing in season 2 with Merrick, and steals monsters and puts them into stone tablets. And then the last one, which I briefly kind of talked about, is the Millennium Necklace, which Ishizu was able to notice about Kaiba's past because this Millennium item sees into someone's past and sees into the future. The first one I want to talk about for a duel is between Mahad and Yami Bakura. This was kind of an intense battle. Obviously, Bakura is going after Mahad because he's got the Millennium Ring. And during this battle to try and win this, which actually he ends up winning, Mahad transfers his spirit into a duel monster that is called Illusion Magician. And while that happens, even though that he won the duel, he goes to seal Diabound, which is the monster that Bakura has, into stone, but actually seals himself and his duel monster into a stone tablet, which on the stone tablet, it ends up reading in hieroglyphics like, I will forever be by the side of the Pharaoh in any situation possible, which Mahad and Illusion Magician end up forming and now become Dark Magician, the duel monster. So this was in an episode that tells you how Dark Magician was created, which I really loved this episode, in which obviously in Funko Pop form, you guys would have known this came out last year in 2019 as a Hot Topic exclusive. Akhenaten during the season is actually revealed to be the biological father of Priest Seto. And during it, he ends up kind of joining sides with Yami Bakura so that he can have Seto become the king instead of the pharaoh. It's revealed that the events that are happening during the season are actually being remade and controlled because Yami Bakura and Yami Yugi in present time are dueling in a shadow game. For the first time since season 1, Exodia actually appears. He does get summoned, which will be the first time that you see Exodia in full form since season 1, which you got to see part of him through the cards in season 2, and you got to see kind of the knockoff Necross version in season 3, but you never got to see Exodia appear again. During the season, actually, Tristan gets possessed by Bakura as they're trying to read hieroglyphics and try to find out what the name of the pharaoh is. But later on, by having everyone concentrate, and this was a suggestion by Taya, the pharaoh has this kind of necklace that's blank. And so if everyone concentrates, then the hieroglyphics will appear. And this happens during the battle with Zork because Zork ends up getting summoned and even the Egyptian god cards can't take him down. But once the pharaoh finds out his name, which actually ends up being Atem, a big shine of light happens. Zork is blinded, but then he's able to summon all 3 Egyptian god cards after that and defeats Zork. The final duel arc. So the pharaoh's job is done. So basically, since the beginning, his main mission was because of the fact that there was a sense that something bad was going to happen and that we were seeing the return of shadow games. And now because of this battle, there's no longer going to be shadow games. Everyone is sent that is evil to the shadow realm once again. So basically, the pharaoh can rest his spirit finally. However, he can't because the only way that he's able to rest is if someone can defeat him in a duel, in which Joey first volunteers because, he technically has 1 loss against the pharaoh because of season 1. Seto wants to face him because, Seto is known to being one of Yugi's rivals. But then it ends up actually Yugi himself volunteers. He's like, I'm going to face the pharaoh, which to me, I was like, no way. Like, is this really happening? Like, if you would have asked me in like season 1 or like spoiled me in season 1 saying, oh, just to let you know, the very final battle in season 5, it's going to be Pharaoh versus Yugi, I would have called bullcrap on that. It just seems like something that wasn't really believable. But then it ended up happening, and it's probably the greatest duel in the entire series. The pharaoh ends up summoning all 3 Egyptian god cards in this battle. And it's like, what the hell? How is he doing this? But during this battle, Yugi summons this magic card where it's kind of a box where Yugi places a card. And if the pharaoh summons that card, it will come out of the box and basically neglect the card he's about to summon, and basically it won't count, and it goes back into like the graveyard or in his deck, in which at some point the Pharaoh goes to use Monster Reborn to revive Slifer the Sky Dragon, and then all of a sudden the card that Yugi pulls out, people are like, no way, there's no way. I think Joey even reacts, he's like, no way, there's no like legit, that would be his reaction. Everyone thought like, how is this possible? Because they're thinking he has a Slifer the Sky Dragon in his deck, which technically there's only one, but the actual card he pulls out is Monster Reborn, which that's the only way that Pharaoh is actually able to summon Slifer, is to use that Monster Reborn, which now that he can't use Monster Reborn, that means Slifer the Sky Dragon can't come out of the graveyard. And once that happens, Yugi ends up defeating the Pharaoh after using Silent Magician and wiping out the rest of Yami's life points. After that, Yugi is on his knees, just bawling his eyes out because he knows that now the Pharaoh has been defeated, that his spirit is going to rest, and that he'll never be able to see the Pharaoh ever again. Kind of an emotional ending, but I say that that was a great season, and that was a great ending to the whole entire series.
Yeah, season 5 is amazing. Like, especially the battle with Exodia and Zork, like when they're like punching each other and stuff.
Yeah.
That was so cool. I loved it.
Anyways, we're going to move on now to kind of what Funko Pops we want to see next.
So the first thing that I want to say is that I honestly believe that Funko's lineup for Yu-Gi-Oh! Should be one of those lineups where there's just as many figures as like the Dragon Ball Z lineup, which has tons and tons of figures, obviously. There's so much that you could do with Yu-Gi-Oh! And I really want to have all these characters in Funko Pop form. The first one is definitely Summon Skull. I love Summon Skull. I always have, ever since I was a little kid. And I honestly think there should be a chase version of the Summon Skull, which is Black Skull Dragon. I think that would be wicked. Another one, super underrated characters. I think there should be a convention exclusive 2-pack of the Paradox Brothers.
Oh my God, I forgot about them.
Obviously, another one that I'm assuming everybody wants to see is Karibo, because that's such a great character. Everybody loves Karibo. He's so cute. Another one that I think would be kind of underrated, but I think it does deserve a Funko Pop, is Beaver Warrior. Beaver Warrior is really cool. I've always liked him. And I would say Blackluster Soldier as well also deserves a Funko Pop.
Yeah, that would be a great Funko Pop. First of all, for human characters, I would love to see Merrick, more specifically like Yami Merrick, where they could really like do some great detail with the facial expressions. A dual monster that you didn't mention, so I'm kind of glad I get to mention it, is Celtic Guardian.
Yeah.
It's one of those dual monsters, you know, it's very well known in Yugi's deck. And also I feel it'd be the closest thing we probably get anytime soon of like a Link from Zelda, because that's what Celtic Guardian kind of looks like. Another one, and I'm kind of glad you didn't say it because I was popping huge when I was thinking about this, a Funko Pop of Time Wizard.
I was going to mention it, but I figured I had already mentioned a bunch. Yeah, Time Wizard would be super dope to see.
And then Arcana and Evil Dark Magician 2-pack. I think it's also kind of a smart route since they've already done Dark Magician, so easily they can just take the same sculpt and just change the color. And then Arcana has such a cool look, especially with the mask, so it's like a brand new mold. Obviously, one, I'm surprised you didn't mention about this, but I think it's also obvious, a nice 6-inch Winged Dragon of Ra, which I still think is going to be a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive for this year.
Yes, that's why I didn't mention that, because I guarantee that will be made. It'll probably be the next Yu-Gi-Oh! Funko Pop that is announced when it does get announced.
That final battle between Pharaoh and Yugi in a pop anime moments.
Yes.
That has to be made. I'm sure they can do so many other duels also. A Grandpa Moto and Game Store Pop Town.
Yes, that'd be great.
Do the game. And then I also had Mokuba and Kaiba Corp Pop Town.
Yes, yes.
That is going to be the end of this week's podcast. We hope that you enjoyed this kind of new, freshened up idea for the podcast where we talk about a TV show or a movie. I do have a couple more ideas, which I think potentially, if you guys like this one, or if you want to see more kind of podcasts like this, comment in the comment section below what you want to see. But I think I got one for next month, actually. But other than that, if you enjoyed this podcast, make sure you smash that like button to let us know that you're enjoying the content that's provided to you guys on this channel, obviously including this podcast. Comment in the comment section below on what Funko Pops you want to see in the future for Yu-Gi-Oh! And tell us some of your favorite moments throughout the series, especially what's your favorite season? Do you like season 5, season 1? What didn't you like about Yu-Gi-Oh? Just comment basically anything Yu-Gi-Oh! Press that subscribe button for more content like this podcast in the future, and press the little bell beside it to be notified of when that future content gets released. Follow us on all of our social media platforms on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at a Funko Popcast. It will be in the description below. But anyways, thank you all for listening to this podcast, and see you guys next week. 1, 2, 3, I'm out of here.
Peace in, peace out.